said he was giving him acupuncture, and he was injecting him, you know, with, not with acupuncture needles, but with syringes.
For over 40 years, the world believed Elvis Presley died like many stars, lost to fame, excess, and harmful substances. But that's only part of the story. Now, at 100, Dr. George Nichopoulos, Elvis's longtime personal doctor, is finally breaking his silence. No lawyers, no media spin, just the truth. He was there in Elvis's final hours and has carried a secret ever since. A truth that could change everything we thought we knew about the king of rock and roll. What really happened behind the doors of Graceland on August 16, 1977? Why did Dr. Nick wait so long to speak out? This isn't a rumor. It's the real story of Elvis's death and how he might have been saved. The unlikely friendship. The friendship between Elvis Presley and Dr. George Nichopoulos began not through fame or influence, but through an urgent need for medical attention. In the late 1960s, Elvis experienced a sudden health issue while at his Mississippi ranch. A local doctor wasn't available, so his team called in Dr. Nick, a reputable physician based in Memphis. It was supposed to be a routine visit, but from the moment Dr. Nick stepped in, something clicked. His calm, straightforward manner stood in stark contrast to the chaos that often surrounded Elvis, and the king of rock and roll took notice. Elvis had grown accustomed to people treating him like a larger-than-life figure, and as a result, he was wary of most new faces. But Dr. Nick didn't fan over him or tiptoe around his status. He treated him like a person, not a legend. This authenticity immediately set him apart. Their first encounter lasted well beyond the typical doctor's visit, evolving into a long conversation about Elvis's health, habits, and lifestyle. That openness planted the seed of trust, something Elvis rarely offered freely, especially to those outside his tightly controlled inner circle. That connection never really existed between Elvis and that calamitous medical professional practitioner. It was not based on music, celebrity, or commercialism. For Elvis, Dr. Nick was someone who, potentially depicting the antithesis of himself, seemed to be completely different, and one who simply wanted to be of assistance instead of capitalizing on his magnanimity. At times, when the diagnosis and treatment became very elaborate, the patient would go to the latter for counsel, something more, providing emotional balance. Furthermore, the doctor would see the heavy toll Elvis paid for the pressures he underwent. Concert after concert, physical toll, not to mention the emotional isolation that goes with global stardom. That one house call was the seed from which a long-lasting relationship grew. Soon after, he was asked by Elvis to be his personal physician. In fact, it would take on roles beyond medicine. Dr. Nick accompanied Elvis on tours, monitored his health, and even took care of Elvis's staff and family. The role carried tremendous responsibility and personal sacrifice, but also involved many moments of wellness. Over the years, what had started as an unanticipated connection metamorphosed into among the strangest yet most important relationships of Elvis Presley. But even the strongest bonds can be tested when fame, exhaustion, and declining health collide. And nowhere was that more evident than on the road. Life on the road. Life on the road with Elvis Presley was a whirlwind of excitement and exhaustion. The public image painted a picture of stardom at its peak. Elvis dazzling fans in packed arenas, clad in glittering jumpsuits and backed by a booming band. Each performance seemed effortless, as if the king of rock and roll thrived on the energy of the crowd. But what fans rarely saw was the grueling nature of the lifestyle that powered this spectacle. The constant movement from city to city, long hours on buses or planes, and the pressure to deliver perfection night after night created an exhausting cycle. Elvis's schedule left little room for rest or recovery. Sleep was often a luxury rather than a routine part of his day, and the lack of stability took a serious toll. Jet lag, irregular meals, and an unpredictable routine made it nearly impossible to maintain good health. Over time, the strain of performing began to wear down not just Elvis's body, but his spirit. The road, once a thrilling part of his rise to fame, became a relentless machine that demanded more than it gave. Despite his love for music and performing, the demands of touring left him increasingly isolated and dependent on medication to cope. Most people, especially celebrities, find it very difficult to keep fit and healthy away from the cameras. Dr. George Nichopoulos, popularly called Dr. Nick, physically witnessed the price that lifestyle took on people. As the personal physician to Elvis, he traveled with him on tour and did his best to manage the care of the singer during his declining health. But even though the best medical care was available, it could not offset the damages incurred from the vicious intensity. There was physical fatigue and, equally, psychological. Elvis, besides these, suffered from anxiety and insomnia, and he also bore the burden of promulgating a mythic image. This dream team of people closed up on Elvis from the roughest sides of the realities of living in fame. By the end of the years of his life, the tours began to leave marks impractically and visibly. Elvis had perhaps begun to demonstrate symptoms of wear and tear and disorientation, previous razzle-dazzle stage presence now beginning to fade. Even though high on emotional intensity, his shows often embodied his behind-the-stage struggles turned into serious contests. For tours, he now suffered with that lifestyle which once spoke of his fortune. Eventually, the very machine that helped immeasurably to propel Elvis into superstardom became a device for the degradation of his health and, ultimately, for his soon tragic death. The night Elvis died. The night of August 16, 1977, marked the tragic and unexpected end of Elvis Presley, one of the most influential figures in music history. He was found unresponsive in the bathroom of his Graceland mansion in Memphis, Tennessee, by his then-fiancée, Ginger Alden. Attempts to revive him failed, and he was pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. at Baptist Memorial Hospital. The news of his death shocked the world, sparking an outpouring of grief from fans and fellow musicians alike. Just 42 years old, Elvis's passing came at a time when he was still actively performing, with a new tour scheduled to begin within days. In the hours and days that followed, details surrounding his death began to surface. The official cause was initially reported as a heart attack, but a toxicology report revealed high levels of prescription substances in his system. Substances including codeine, Valium, and morphine were found, suggesting that years of prescription harmful substances abuse had contributed significantly to his demise. While no illegal substances were detected, the sheer volume and combination of medications raised serious concerns about his health management and the role of those around him, including his personal physician, Dr. George "Nick" Nichopoulos. Those close to Elvis, and even the public, began noticing the aforementioned populist changes leading to his death, as the condition went degeneratively worse. Weight gain was a major factor in his commencing lethargy, manifested during performances and other public events, while he suffered from several health problems, including high blood pressure, liver impairment, and glaucoma. Yet in spite of all these warning signals, Elvis continued to perform under an unbearable force. The career demands, the urge to please his fans, and the dependence on heaps of prescription substances forged for him, an intensified but ultimately self-destructive system that greatly contributed to his early demise. Yet much more than the gloom of losing a musical icon does the night on which Elvis died signify. Rather, it would also resound through the wake-up call to the shady underbelly of fame. His death roused awareness on the topic of prescription medications with particular reference to celebrities and initiated much wider debate around responsibilities of those who are party to the so-called circles of entertainers. Elvis Presley, though long departed, still affects music, culture, and the society in understanding the burdens of celebrity when he was alive. The first autopsy. Just hours after his death on August 16, 1977, the first autopsy on Elvis Presley was performed at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. At the request of his family, the autopsy was performed by Dr. Jerry Francisco, the Shelby County Medical Examiner, along with a team of pathologists. The immediate cause of death was officially listed as cardiac arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat likely caused by a heart attack. However, this conclusion left many questions unanswered, particularly given Elvis's age and the known issues with his health and lifestyle. Dr. Francisco stated that substances were not a contributing factor to Elvis's death, a claim that was met with skepticism by medical experts and the media. Critics argued that this assessment seemed premature, especially considering the extensive list of prescription medications that were later found in his system. Despite the statement, the toxicology results were sealed by the Presley family, fueling public speculation and theories about the real cause of his death. The toxicology panel opened several months after the most original post-mortem examination and showed that Elvis had in his body, at the time of death, no less than 14 various substances, including high-powered sedatives, anti-anxiety medications, and painkillers. Some of the medications were confined in extremely high concentrations. It also raised serious questions about medically covered-up things and about how his physician, Dr. George Nichopoulos, was tied to the legacy, who was later investigated by the Tennessee Medical Board for overprescribing substances. There were no illegal substances in his system, but the legal combination was quite potentially lethal and likely triggered the cardiac event that finally caused Elvis's demise. More than anything, the first autopsy remains a prominent segment of Elvis Presley's inheritance. It ignited discussions about the issue of health care for the rich and famous, prescription substances abuse, and medical ethics. While the official cause of death remains a matter of record, the first autopsy revealed as much about the culture that surrounded Elvis as about the condition of his body. The medications controversy. Following Elvis Presley's death in 1977, controversy over his use of medications began to intensify as revelations surfaced about the extensive pharmaceutical regimen he had maintained for years. Although Elvis was known to suffer from several legitimate health conditions, such as insomnia, high blood pressure, and chronic pain, the sheer volume and variety of medications he was prescribed raised serious concerns. Reports indicated that he routinely took a cocktail of substances, including barbiturates, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, stimulants, and opiates. Dr. Nick had been prescribing medications to Elvis for nearly a decade and traveled with him on tour to monitor his health. In 1980, Dr. Nichopoulos was indicted on charges of overprescribing substances to Elvis and several other patients, including issuing thousands of prescriptions in the final months of Elvis's life. Although he was acquitted of criminal charges, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners later found him guilty of unprofessional conduct and eventually revoked his medical license in 1995. With the famous case of Elvis Presley, prescription substances abuse was seen from the start and, in the most high-profile manner, became one of its cases. Many critics say Elvis was a captive in a system that had always prioritized keeping him functional over dealing with the root causes of his medical problems. This pathology of overprescription eventually became a cautionary tale, with Elvis being the first of many in the decades after. The medications issue not only reframed public discourse over Elvis's final days, it also invited greater discourses in the medical fraternity on the ethics of treating famous patients. It foregrounded accountability in the doctor-patient relationship concerning a patient who had immense clout. Elvis's deteriorating health traced a complicated line between the misuse of prescription substances as a symptom and a cause. For Elvis, prescription substances are a legacy of unimaginable brilliance and compassion, but carry with them a deep, grim reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind fame and irresponsible medical practice. The 1980 Trial and Acquittal. The 1980 trial of Dr. George Nichopoulos, Elvis Presley's longtime personal doctor, marked a pivotal moment in the investigation into the circumstances surrounding Elvis's death. Dr. Nichopoulos was charged with overprescribing controlled substances to Elvis and several other patients, including entertainers Jerry Lee Lewis and others. The indictment alleged that between 1975 and 1977, Dr. Nick had prescribed over 10,000 doses of various medications to Elvis, many of which included narcotics, sedatives, and stimulants. The case marked one of the earliest high-profile attempts to hold a celebrity physician accountable for reckless prescription practices. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence showing that Dr. Nichopoulos had prescribed an overwhelming volume of medications, often without proper medical justification. They argued that he had crossed ethical and legal lines by continuing to supply substances even when it was clear Elvis was dependent on them. However, the defense contended that Dr. Nick had acted out of concern for Elvis's well-being, claiming he attempted to manage and taper the star's substance intake to prevent him from seeking even more dangerous alternatives elsewhere. The defense also emphasized the pressure Elvis placed on his physician to provide him with the medications he demanded. After nearly all of November in 1980, having gone through all that, the jury acquitted Dr. Nichopoulos from all criminal charges. Although Dr. Nick escaped prison, his trial had severely tarnished his reputation and had brought national attention to the hazards of overprescribing, especially in a situation with the highest of profiles. To many, this court verdict in 1980 did little to exonerate him for actions some people claim led to Elvis's early death. Even though there were acquittals, Dr. Nichopoulos's troubles were far from over. The Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners later carried out an independent inquiry on his practice and, in 1995, stripped him of his medical license on grounds of unethical behavior concerning overprescribing substances. The trial and post-trial events spotlight the differing nature of treating patients from the entertainment business, where fame, money, and access to healthcare sometimes come together in destructive ways. The 1980 trial remains a critical chapter in the broader indictment of Elvis Presley and a defining case in the history of medical ethics and celebrity healthcare. But the courtroom wasn't the final battleground. Outside the legal system, the media and public launched their own investigation into what really happened to the king. Media fallout and second autopsy. Following Elvis Presley's death in 1977 and the initial autopsy results, the media frenzy surrounding the circumstances of his passing intensified rapidly. While the official cause was listed as cardiac arrhythmia, many members of the press and public remained skeptical, especially after rumors began circulating about the extent of his prescription substances use. The Presley family's decision to seal the full autopsy report for 50 years only fueled speculation, leading journalists and fans alike to question whether the truth was being hidden. Tabloids published sensational headlines, suggesting that substances played a more direct role than authorities admitted, and television specials and documentaries began dissecting Elvis's final days in detail. The growing media pressure, combined with persistent rumors and mounting public demand for answers, eventually led to calls for a second look at the circumstances surrounding his death. Although a formal second autopsy was never performed in the traditional sense, independent forensic experts and journalists revisited the original findings using the available data, including the toxicology reports released later. These secondary investigations suggested that Elvis's death was not merely due to heart disease, but likely exacerbated or directly caused by polypharmacy, the dangerous combination of multiple prescription substances. Perhaps the most important event occurred in 1994 when Dr. Joseph Davis, an eminent forensic pathologist and former medical examiner for Miami-Dade County, was asked by unnamed parties to review the medical evidence. Dr. Davis concluded that death was likely due to a sudden disturbance of heart rhythm from toxic interaction with substances rather than due to pre-existing heart disease alone. This opinion lent credence to the theory that Elvis's copious amounts of medications, some of which had the effect of slowing respiration and cardiac function, were critical in accounting for his premature death. In the story after Elvis's death, the second autopsy had a major role in changing the way celebrity deaths are being considered as well as reported till present. It focused public attention on the matter of over-medication in the entertainment sector and kicked off debates about the need for greater transparency in celebrity autopsies. The continued public fascination surrounding Elvis's final days illustrates the continued desire for the full disclosure of the truth behind his death. Although no official second autopsy dismissed the original cause of death, the ensemble of expert recounts and media skepticism has ensured that the questions of Elvis's demise will remain a part of his convoluted legacy. Meggaolon. One of the most surprising and medically significant discoveries following Elvis Presley's death was the condition known as Meggaolon, which came to light during the original autopsy. Meggaolon is an abnormal dilation of the colon that can interfere with normal bowel movements and lead to chronic constipation and other gastrointestinal complications. In Elvis's case, his colon was reportedly between 5 to 6 inches in diameter, nearly twice the size of a healthy colon, and stretched over 8 to 9 feet in length. This was a severe and advanced form of the condition, indicating that he had likely suffered from it for many years. The presence of Meggaolon helped explain a number of the chronic health complaints Elvis had endured throughout his adult life, including severe abdominal pain, bloating, and difficulty maintaining a regular diet. His chronic constipation was so extreme that it contributed significantly to his discomfort and possibly to his reliance on prescription medications for pain relief and digestive regulation. Some experts believe that the intense straining caused by this condition may have played a role in the heart arrhythmia that led to his death, especially since Elvis was found on the floor of his bathroom, suggesting he may have collapsed while attempting to have a bowel movement. What makes this finding even more startling is that whereas Elvis's disease was either undiagnosed or inadequately treated, he had, for all practical purposes, lived life up to that point without any semblance of a serious diagnosis. His gastrointestinal issues were either misdiagnosed or treated symptomatically with medications without ever being fully worked up, even with the best of professionals in charge. This concerns a much broader issue about his health. Many of his symptoms have been treated in isolation rather than under an umbrella of diagnosis. Thus, the condition of Meggaolon A, potentially treatable disease, was allowed to be overlooked. The revelation of Elvis's Meggaolon markedly changed the perspective of many concerning the circumstances of his decline. It introduced the idea that not all of the health problems involved were lifestyle or substance-related. They included an aggravated, serious medical condition that was essentially disregarded. Certainly, the use of prescription substances aggravated the situation. However, the very presence of the Meggaolon demonstrated that Elvis suffered not only from the pressures of fame and addiction, but also from a painful and poorly understood medical condition. This discovery has drawn attention to digestive health for doctors and has become an emotional chapter in the saga of Elvis Presley's last days. What could have saved Elvis? In the years since Elvis Presley's untimely death, many medical professionals and biographers have reflected on what interventions might have saved his life. One of the clearest paths to a different outcome would have been early and accurate diagnosis of his underlying health issues, particularly his chronic gastrointestinal condition, later identified as Meggaolon. Had this condition been properly diagnosed and treated during his lifetime, it could have significantly improved his quality of life and reduced his dependency on prescription substances used to manage related pain and symptoms. Surgical intervention, dietary changes, and specialized care might have prevented the extreme discomfort that plagued him for years. Another major factor that could have altered Elvis's fate was more responsible medical oversight. For much of his adult life, Elvis was surrounded by enablers, including some in his medical team, who prioritized appeasing him over setting strict health boundaries. Dr. George Nichopoulos, his personal physician, prescribed thousands of pills annually, often without consistent monitoring or coordination with other healthcare providers. If Elvis had been under the care of a multidisciplinary medical team that emphasized long-term wellness, mental health support, and accountability in prescription practices, the risk of fatal substance interactions might have been greatly reduced. The lifestyles followed by Elvis may indeed have been a very important factor in extending the numerical values of his life. By the mid-1970s, he had virtually ceased all physical activity, followed a poor diet, and had developed substance dependence. An organized plan involving dietary interventions, exercise classes, and mental health counseling addressing the different aspects related to fame discouragement, stress, and anxiety would have perhaps put him back in control of his body and mind. Along with rehabilitation in his case from prescription substances dependence, having had therapy and counseling support would have given Elvis the skills to cope against pain and emotional turmoil. Ultimately, he may have survived with the proper medical care, healthier lifestyle choices, and a life nurtured by concern for his well-being rather than performance schedules and public image. Although sad, his death has highlighted the need for holistic healthcare interventions for people in stressful occupations. Elvis Presley's story provides an impetus for the practice of watchful medical ethics, truthfulness, and compassion for the sake of life and the quality of that life. Legacy, loyalty, and misunderstanding. Elvis Presley's legacy is one of immense cultural and musical influence, but it is also shaped by deep loyalty from those who knew him and enduring misunderstanding from the outside world. To millions of fans, Elvis was more than just a performer. He was a symbol of passion, rebellion, and charisma. His groundbreaking fusion of gospel, blues, country, and rock reshaped American music and left an indelible mark on global culture. Yet behind the spotlight, Elvis was a complex, often misunderstood figure. Those closest to Elvis, his family, friends, and staff, often referred to as the Memphis Mafia, remained fiercely loyal to him throughout his life and long after his death. Their devotion was rooted in gratitude and genuine affection, but it also led to a protective environment that sometimes enabled his unhealthy habits. Many of them tried to shield Elvis from harsh realities or public scrutiny. However, that loyalty sometimes came at a cost, as it made it harder for anyone to intervene effectively in his declining health or challenge the decisions that led to his overmedication and isolation. Especially in the late years of his life, A lot of misunderstanding contributed to shaping public perception of Elvis. As he fell sick and became addicted to substances, the media transmuted him from a once prominent figure into an individual whose glittering career was dimming. No one really understood how severely life had impacted his health. This seemed to focus more on the scandal and show than it did on careful, cold reality and compassion. And though it is a tragedy that could cover up any last couple of years, Elvis, indeed, lives on in memory. His fans remain unmatched in loyalty, and there are attempts to learn more about the man than the myth. By the weighings of the ambiguities and misplaced loyalties that define his life, we will give ourselves a more richly painted view of who Elvis really was, and a lot of insight into the pressures faced by individuals who live daily under the constant gaze of fame. Still, even decades later, the search to truly understand Elvis, beyond the myth and media glare, hasn't ended, and recent revelations have only deepened the intrigue. Recent revelations. In recent years, new insights have added more depth to the mystery surrounding Elvis Presley's death. One of the most significant first-hand accounts came from Ginger Alden, Elvis's girlfriend at the time, who was the one to discover him unresponsive on the bathroom floor of Graceland. According to her, Elvis had likely collapsed while trying to use the toilet, an image that reinforced long-standing speculation about the role his chronic constipation and other health problems may have played in his death. Beyond Alden's account, medical experts have taken a closer look at the original autopsy findings. Dr. Forrest Tennant, a physician who later reviewed the reports, introduced a compelling theory. He suggested that a serious head injury Elvis sustained in 1967 may have triggered an autoimmune condition, which in turn led to a cascade of health complications. These could have included chronic pain, inflammation, and even the gastrointestinal issues that plagued Elvis for years. The idea that Elvis died simply because of substance use and poor lifestyle choices is challenged by these recent revelations. Instead, these findings indicate how a mix of ignored medical problems, injuries, and perhaps even some mismanagement from those around him had added to his demise. Elvis's death was more complex and more human than most ever knew. If this changed how you see the king, give us a thumbs up and drop a comment. Do you think he could have been saved? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the stories history tried to hide. Ready for more? Click the next video. You won't believe what we found.